for a High African History and Heritage TV. Yemo bibia achen edeba African History and Heritage TV so. Eneso somo for historian Kodwajemai, Magia Kunya. Na sene ameye ne da no me de adesua eneba. Ene yebetoa so eye etwaka eda Asante ene Bono fuontem no. Ene ne yede episode 6 no eba. Enti ene ne yeda edika oba e channel iso a bomodian se obe subscribe no wa share. Ama adofo nkaye nso enya kasebo bi atie. Na ansa na yebe hyase no yebe da obo ade asese wa ma de pache ye ne yasre obo ade nsam nhyira. Ediama African History and Heritage TV yetifo ahwefo nyina. Sebribia ye content etumu a mo subscribe na mo share ma atifo ana adofo nkaye nso enya bi ehwe. Na ndeno yedaso ewo tanusubini enkronum na yadru eboyem momienti eboyemfo abakoseme efa twaka eda boyem ene Asante ntem eho problems wo na minim se yedesa kaseboye no bebo wiye no na tifo mate niema bibre ase yenkwe boyem nana owusu kwakuru boyem hene told the committee that his ancestral mother by name Nana Jamra came out of Amowiho with Techimai people. It was the son of his queen mother, Nana Techiamida, who later became Techimahene. From the Amowiho, they first settled at Techimai Manso, where the war broke out between Nana Techimahene and Nana Asante. This was in the reign of Opokuwara I. The Techimans having been defeated, the Boyam group then left Manso for their present place of abode. The Asante did not mete out any punishment to the Boyams for fighting against him in the said war. A second war between Asante and Techimai subsequently broke out. The Boyams naturally assisted the Techimai, but Techimahene fled to German. It was after this time that Boyamhene was invited to Kumasi and made to serve Asante through Asante Hema. However, when Prempeh I was taken to Seychelles, Nana Techimahene came back from German. Boyams too was put on the Techimai again. Ne boyamfo so kana no boyamfo asem se ben ne Techimafo nyina ende free Amowi cave num abodam num epieye e na beko kyekyere manso Bono manso kingdom no ben ne Techimafo adehye a kyiri bebe frɛ be ho Techimafo yi e ne ko kyekyere Techimai no de Nana Jamra ono ne di oye oba pani a odi boyamfo yanim Jamrai na oye Nana Techi ameyaw na omfri Amowiho hono be ko kyekyere manso senam di kankan no Opokuwara the first ekutiawo okutiawo no boyamfo naturally no be ye Techimafo abusuafo nti be kokon e de boa Techimai nanso Techimai edi nkuguo ntokwa foforo esan sorry ntokwa no be kon mprenu na ntokwa na etoso mienu Asante ekotehye Techimai ana Bono manso so no ema Nana meyaw otuamantuo eko German na otuamantuo no eno ho no Techimai sorry boyam ekosom Asante Sante hene e de boyam ekohye Sante himalsa Techimahene efri German ba ye no de isanse na besom no dadanti no besan ekosom Techimai Ochiame Kwakusian linguist of Asante Hema in his version of the history of the Boyam stool told the committee that during the Asante Tetman War in which the Tetman were defeated, the inhabitants of Boyam were captured and brought to Kumasi. Among the captives was one Nana Gamara, a sister of Tetmahene who was the queen mother of Boyam. Nana Pokuara directed that Nana Gamara should serve in the household of Asante Hema. In addition, he gave the Asante Hema the whole township of Boyam as gift. Since then, in accordance with custom, whenever the Boyam stool becomes vacant, Asante Hema was informed before a new chief is installed. In his installation, the new chief would then be brought to Kumasi to be introduced to the Asante Hema, and thereafter permission is then sought from her for the Boyam chief to swear to the Asante Hene. At the moment, a number of Boyam citizens are serving in the Asante Hema's household, concluded Ochiame Kwakusian. Ochiame Kwakusian oye Asante Hema ne chiame eso de to so se enokra Boyam fo ene tetmafo kabo mu ena be ne Asante kon ye na beti nkuguo ena be de Boyam Hema ye frɛ ne dwamerewa ebetna Kumasi na Opokua the first ede no share Asante Hema nsa. Enti esan se okunti aboyam ti no okan se boyam kru no ode ne nsa to so na ode akɔhye Asante Hema nsa. Enti ifiri onom kono de ohene bi a bɛ no besi akonwa so ɛwɔ boyam bia no esese bɛde no kɔkyerɛ Asante Hema. Na sabre ya na okasa eye 1973 no na Boyam adehye binom kra ete Asante Hema ni fie. Adofo subscribe na share na ma adofo nkae inti kasebo bi enti Boyam etwaka ebeda Boyam fo ene Asantefo entem no. Now yankoso Nkyiraa. The Nkyiraa Hene Nana Tabiri tracing the history of his stool, told the committee that his ancestors migrated from a cave called Orobo, led by Nana Atiayao, having in their possession two main fetishes and the stools. From the whole, they first settled at Boso and later Nkyiraa. Near Nana Nkyiraa Hene Tabiri nso kana se Veso onananum epiefri abodam bia na ewo Orobo na beba no na beso babosom eni benkodwa na befri abodanum no bekotra ba bia na befre ho boso befri boso na bekokyekere Nkyiraa yenkoe. Their main occupation was to administer herbal medicine with the help of their fetishes. In the reign of Nana Boy, chief of Nkyiraa, Nana Opokua waged war against Chimai. Near Nana Nkyiraa Hene Tabiri kana se adwumatutira na Nkyiraa eye ene se na be herbalist besan wo ba bosoma abosomi eboa won ma wonom esa nyarewa ebibiri. Na ohina yefra Nana Boy ne penso na Opokua the first or ne tetmafo ekontokwa anase okoto share Bono Mansu kingdom so. Some of the Ashantis were seriously injured, and having been informed that the Nkyiraas were good herbalists, the Asante Hene asked them to assist in treating the injuries, and this was accordingly done. Ose, Asantea Nsantokwe no Asantea sojafo no binum prepare. Na beti se Nkyiraa beno be herbalist ana bedin habama aduro ntino Asante hene ema Asante sojafoɔ bi bɛkɔbɔ bɛho adwa ɛwɔ Nkyiraa ma Nkyiraafoɔ ɛsa wɔnom ɛyare. Nana Tabri maintained that his ancestors did not take part in the Asante Techiman War in which the Techmans were defeated. The Asante hene, in recognition of Nkyiraa services to the Ashanti nation, created him his Nsumankwa hene and asked him to live with him in Kumasi. Now, since Asante hene ohun say, Nkyiraafoɔ be abosmi ba bene na benim be herbalist and then brema yebeka se be doctor foa akukudamfo ntino obo omo Nsumankwa hene. Nsumankwa hene no ene no nke be friend Minister of Religious Affairs ana se Minister of Health sa pepepe ena obo sabudin ena odema Nkyiraafo ena oma wonum babi ukutwa asase ewu Kumasi babi ede ma won ede che won sabra me kase de yesi asase no ya je afri won nsam na yebeba so. Since then, every occupant of the Nkyiraa too swears oath of allegiance to Asante hene through Nsumankwa hene. In short, the Nsumankwas too and the Nkyiraa too are brothers, since the former was created for an earlier occupant of the Nkyiraa too. Near now can say, Nana can say, if we sabreno Nkyiraa ekosum Asante na Nkyiraa ebeye Nsumankwa hene ose Nkyiraa akunwa no eye Nsumankwa hene a oti Kumasi ninua yenkoso Nana Domfagi abo Nsumankwa hene of Kumasi supported the evidence of Nana Tabri Ababiu. Ose Nsumankwa hene a owo Kumasi a yefre Nana Domfagi abo nso kan se asemo a Nana Tabri Ababiu aka ye akinye bia ni ho eye nokre trudu na yenkoso yadru subinso. In his evidence before the committee, Nana Kwabena Kom Subinso hene traced the history of his tool. According to him, his ancestors led by Techi came from a hole at a place called Borpo, Mwaso, and settled at Subinso. They heard of the Techman's chief, who was considered the most powerful chief in the area, and so went to him and placed themselves under him for protection. Nana Kwabena Kom natima okan say Subinso fo be free ebo bim ne pieye ewo probo mwoso na bebetena wa bi abewo ya ne be fra ho Subinso yi na ho na bete se asase na beto so no ohini bi wo ho a ono wo ditumi yie oye na Techman hene sa abre na ye bonoma so hene enti be ko ne nchen e de be ho ko share ne nsa se omo be ho ban enti fro ko no Subinso fo ebe ye bonoma so ane abedan Techman na Techman hene na deshire. During annual festivals, the Subinso ancestors were supplied with gunpowder by Techman hene, and they in turn sent to him parts of the game killed. Ose afashe duru a Techman hene ede atuduro ekoma Subinso fo na beso babre Techman hene enam ede atuyaka. When they were serving Techman, a second war arose between Ashantis and Techman, in which Techman hene fled to Germany. Ose begusu a beni Techman fo ete hono ena the second war, Asante Techman war, the second war no break out. Ena Techman hene ekobo ne ho adwa ewo Germany. When Techman hene fled, Subinso had no overlord. So Nana Subinso hene went to Kumasi and voluntarily submitted to the traditional authority of Asante hene in Kumasi. Ose na Techman hene ekobo ne ho bia ewo German no na chese subin sofo be ni wura bia nti ba be de be pem ene nante pampan eko na Asante hene ho se omo be ho bane ifi se bewura no ede ne ho akawura. In Kumasi, the Asante hene placed the Subinsu stool under the Ananta hene. Ne koba sano Asante hene ede Subinsu ekoshe Ananta hene se nifye wura ne Ananta hene. Inti opeso obechia ono Asante hene. Jise obo Ananta hene amaneye. Ansana Ananta hene edinanim edina ko Asante hene nchai. According to Nanakom, Subinsu people, after submitting to Asante, assisted the Ashantis in several wars, including Fantisa. However, when Prempeh I was taken to Seychelles and Techman returned from German, the Subinsu people once again came under Techman. The Subinsu stool regards itself as still owing allegiance to Techman, the present position of the law notwithstanding, concluded Nana Akon. Ose, na be kobo Asante hene Bono, be bo Asante hene emane kontoko bebre. Ebi te se Fantisa, be bo Asante hene. Ne koba se na Techman hene ese fira kontum ewo German bae no. Be san in his version of the history of Subinsu to Bafo Apia Dankwa Anantahino of Kumasi told the committee that the ancestors of Subinsu came from a place called Bropomboasu near Techman. And Nana Apia Dankwa so ya Nantahino of Kumasi or no so je to Mose Subinsu fue be free Bropomboasu senia. Nana kom kwabna kom edi kankan no na Bropon bosui eho eben Techman. During the Asante Techman war, they assisted the Techmans and were captured by the Asante army when Techmans were defeated. Na Techman fo edi nkuguo no safwe Subinsofo Asante sojafo no eche wonum dumum. After the war continued Bafo Apia Dankwa, the Subinsu people were made to serve Asante hene through Ananta hene. They assisted the Ashantis in several wars, including the Fantisa. According to Bafo Apia Dankwa, although he is the immediate overlord of Subinsu stew, Subinsu lands belong to his younger brother, the Nkyiraa hene. Ni awoka ne se eye nokre se ne nana Subinsu hene oka ye no ana Subinsu hene kwabna kom ka ye no eye nokre se be bo Asante hene be kotna be hokoshe Asante ase no be bo Asante hene mane kontrokwa bibri Fantisa be bo anu mane kon na Apia Dankwa a ono Oya Nantahino wu Kumasi eto aso eka se sabra no de na ono na no oye Subinsu fo bewura na Subinsu asase de eye Nkyiraa edia sa ena ana Apia Dankwa a oye Anantahene a ote Kumasi ono nso abakosema efo Subinsu a Odebetubia as far back as in 1973. Na yenko Branham ne mwase. Nana Kwabena Bedi upon the fourth chief of Branham, tracing the history of the Branhams too, told the committee that his grand ancestor was called Brumankma. He led the Branhams from a hole at Mansera. Nana Branham hene Kwabena Bedi akon a oto so nan ono so na sema o kantre committee no ne se Branham akonwa no eye ono ne nananom akonwa preko ape na wonom efri Bruman ne nana ye fre ne Bruman kuma ono ene bo Branham akonwa no na Branham fo be free abodam bi a na ewo babia yefre ho Mansera. Having settled at Mansera, now called Branham, for some time war broke out between the Ashantis and the Germans. The Asante requested Nana Brumankmo to help in the war, and the latter agreed to and fought on the side of Ashantis. Ose bebe tena babiane Mansera ho a ne yefre ho Branamino ancher bia ne Asante ene German war ya Bokofi war 1740s num e breaking out na ntokwa no esi ye no Branamfo ekota Asantefo achi Santehene opoku arachi ma one German for ekon. After the German war, for no justifiable cause at all, Dadeso Abahene of Kumasi attacked and plundered the people of Branham, resulting in the loss of several lives and property. Or say, after German war, no beku German to kwa wiye, but who ye see ye na Dadeso Abahene so eso anaso jafo, na bebe to share Branham for so. Ekun bebre. Brumankuma was killed in the incident, and Nanaya Obediakon, who succeeded the latter, lodged a complaint with Asante about Dadeso Aba's misbehavior. Nana Dadeso Abahene could not offer any satisfactory explanation for his act, and was thereupon ordered by Otumfuo to return to Branham and gather the rest of the people there and depute somebody to take care of them. Now eto aso say Brumankuma Dadeso Abafo beto share Branhamfo so be kun Brumankuma na ntokwa no guye no ena Branhamfo ekobo poku aramane no ema na Otumfuo poku anso ne bufu yie pa ho eno ka kire Dadeso Abahene se onsane nko Branham kronum na onko boaboa adehye na onyi obi mane enye bepanyini ewo ho na onya ntokwa no kon. Anatana Jew, who hailed from Bono near Kumasi, was then asked to leave with the Branhams and take care of them. Also, Anatana Jew ofri Bono eben Kumasi. Ya do no betena Branham se onhwe Branhamfo no so na anyabia obi amfri ba bia meto ahye so bio. Tanaje and his people reared goats, and because a Branham fetish by the name Atiekosa had a particular dislike for goats, Branham showed them a new site under a big Nwo 3, and that settlement became Nwase. The history of Branham, said Nana Bediako, is inextricably interwoven with that of Nwase. Nia Okan say Nana Tano Jia Santehene eyi no say ono meboaboa adehye no a bewo Branham na ntokwa nti Dadeso aba ntokwa Dadeso Abahene de kota benti no babo ahwete no o meboaboa ba no na ompe bi obi na oniba nim anase onibe so hene no ono so de ose yoyo oba na oba no nyane nkwa ne ba ye kontakro o de adehye no binum efri na edi na chi efri bo ho a ebene Kumasi ebetna Branham na bebetna Branham no ena omyesu adehye abefri bo ho abai yen Branham fo je se ye mabeba bitna enti be kotwa asase babi edemawo na asase a omde mawo no na edua ye frɛ ne nwo ewo ho enti basetena na kuro abekyekyere ye no adehye abefri bo ho a eyi Kumasi bae no onom eto ho enwo ase enti na kyerɛ se Nwasefo Branhamfo and the two Nwasefo Denua Prekwape. Nana Bediako contended that when the Nwasi people settled at their present place of abode, they and the Branhams together submitted to Techmahene and served the latter. According to him, the Branhams are not Ashantis and cannot, therefore, serve the Goodings too. Nana Bediako committee for no say, Nwasefo no betra hono. Branhamfo no ne Nwasefo no yina ekosom Techman. Na ne de oka sisu dua. Se Branhamfo ye bonofo enti be de Techman na bebesom na nya de abeba kwa akosum skadwa da. Branhamfo ne Nwasefo ba sema be de tudwa ene no. Yenkwe Nana Kwasi Bediako III, also claiming to be the Branham Hene, gave his version of the history of the Branhams too before the committee. Nache se Branham Kruno Mwache Mienu, Ahemfono Mwache Mienu, Ahimienua. Ewo hono, we de mekwa Asante, we so menkwa Asante no. Eno hon tumani yepai. Nana Kwasi Bediako II, also claiming to be Branham Hene, gave his version of the history of the Branhams too before the committee. According to him, his ancestors came from a cave, a place called Mansra, led by Kwame Depi. They settled at Mansra, now called Branham, or no Wakansem Kronoa, where at one stage in their history, the Asante Hene with his army passed through that area in his way to prosecute war against the Germans. The Branham ancestors were not serving any chief then. Nana Kwame Depi had then died and had been succeeded by Brumankuma. Also, ne waka yene say, Besu be free Mansra, Nana Kwame Depi ene di banim. Na betuwa na da kuro bi behu se Asante Hene one na sojafo besena twam ewo Branham akokon atia German. Na Nana Kwame Depi owuye no Nana Brumankuma ene bidi na kunwa ewo Branham kuro. On reaching Mansra, eno Mansra no na yefre ne Branhami, the Asante Hene asked Brumankuma and his men to accompany him to the said war. The latter agreed and accordingly proceeded with the Ashanti army. The Ashanti subsequently conquered the Germans. Thereafter, the Asante Hene sent bearers to Nana Brumankuma demanding payment of his share of war debt known as Apiatuo. The chief of Branham refused, saying that the German war had not been of his making. No, can say, Asante Hene kokontia German no 1940s no moduru Branham no kanso. Branham for momra ne monko boame ne yankuntia abokofi of German. But the osia yo ebo Asante Hene mane kuntia abokofi of German di ne sunkunim. Na ntokwane gu ye no na Asante ne oden krakoma Branham for na Brumankuma se ntokwa etu abeto atudu abeto ye nom ne ade ka abebo ye no eso no tua bi eno ne fre ne apiato we ene ma Branham Hene ono so kan se na ntokwa enya menem kokon ye na Asante Hene odiam timba bi no kan se mi nkoja ma nkokon ntokwa made mmoja akokon aboa mo wadi nkunima na wo watuduru a woto ye nso ehon ka bi ubeka se mi ntu ade a na enye ne kwanso no. When news of Brumankuma's refusal reached the Asante Hene, the latter became so infuriated that he directed that Swaba Hene to launch an attack on the Branhams. As a result, Dade Swaba destroyed Branham and killed several of its descendants. Nana Kwasi Bediako the third ono so oye Branham hene o claim so oye Branham hene na sema o kan say sa Nana Buruman kuma emuaya o de koma Asante hene nti ehye Opokua the first abufu ma osoma dade so aba hene mane beto hye Branham fo so a okum Branham fo adehye bibiri. This incident apart, the Nkransas also kept harassing the Branhams, and so upon an appeal from Branham Hene to Asante Hene, the Deadoeso Aba Hene was directed to detail some of his subjects to come and live at Branham to protect his people. Tanaji, the nephew of the Deadoeso Aba Hene, was deputed to come and settle with the Branhams. This Tanaji came with a fetish called Atiakusa, which did not like goats. But the place abounded in goats. He came to settle under Ngo tree, now Ngoso, which place was allocated to him by Branham Hene. Nana Kwasi Bediako so na sema o kan no. O say yes, odi adanse trudu say Nwasefo nso efri Tanoji ene di bonim Tanoji na Deadoeso Aba Hene ne wofase ono na Asante Hene etu no ma oba Branham se ometna ho na ommo Branham fo eho ban oba odene bosuma yefre na Atiakusa bai na Atiakusa no na ye bosum bia ochiri aponche Branham so de na mponche wo hopa nti ekoba asa no be command ba bitnaye ba bia be de man no na dua wo ho ayefre ne nwase enti enwase ebeye natnaye no edin na oba no so ne ono nko akontekro ne baaye ode na busuafo binom ebaaye ena eko onum kotna nwase Branham fo eneto nwasefo edanua na nana asema ono so ekaye no. Nana Kwasi Bediako admitted before the committee that his two owe allegiance to Asante Hene through Deadoeso Aba Hene, and that Branham's two lands belong to the Golden Stool. Nana Yao Boateng Deadoeso Aba Hene substantially supported the evidence of Nana Bediako the third. Of all subscribe and share the High African History and Heritage TV. Eps6.Nkyiraa Bono so. Na sabre yadru Ofuman number 1. Ofuman krono muache mienu Ofuman abase and Ofuman dampaso yenkwe. Nana Kwasi for the secondest Ofuman Hene tracing the history of the Ofumans to disclosed to the committee that his ancestors came out of a hole called Horrible and settled at a place called Achibwa and thence moved to another place called Kwao. Subsequently, they met Tetmahene in the vicinity and finding him a powerful chief, submitted to him for his protection. They stayed peacefully with the Tetmahene until the Opokua War. Meanwhile, from Kwao, they moved to the present place of abode under Bofnu tree, from which the name Ofuman was derived. Nana Kwasi Fana Sima wo kan say onanam no ma be chichire fuma man no be free robo abodanum na be trouble bia na be frɛ ho Kwao ɛhɔ ɛna be shi be hu Tetmahene sabre na ye Bono manso na be hu so yo henkese enti be de be hu kobata no ekɔhye na se bambo inti na befru Kwao no na besantu amontu eba babia nnebeti na saa bia no so na bofunu ye fre ne fruntum no na bi wo hopa nti bofunu yakotena babia bofunu no wo ena abeye Ofuman kasahare ene kasase nti ya be fre ne Ofuman yenkwe. Then the Techiman Asante war broke out, and Techmahine, having been defeated, fled to German. The people of Ofuman #1 who did not take part in this war were left without an overlord or a protector. They therefore went to Kumasi and voluntarily submitted to the Asante with a view of serving him. In Kumasi, they were asked to serve the Goldings through the dear Swabahin. Or say, Techman na Asante Koye no. Kane no nan kabe sum Techman na nso be kobo be ho Techman ne kobo ne ho bia wo German no. Na kire se be ne papa bia a bebe dan no. Ma be e de be pe ekọ Asante hene ho. Ekọ sre no se omo be ho ba ne e de be ho ko bata. Ono so e de omo e hye dadie so abahene ase. Se be fi wura no be pese be Kumasi na be hu Asante hena be yeren be nkohu dadie so abahene. However, continued Nanafa, when Prempeh the First was exiled to Seychelles and Techmahine returned from German, Ofuman served Techiman. Ofuman lands maintained Nanafa belonged to the Ofumans too. Nana Kosifa Okan and say yes. Now Techmahine Ofri German by no. But dane boni so you run about there any yensan kosum e kosum no na Ofuman asase de oni obi a momhye wone Ofuman asase e Ofuman na konwa de na hina na ote konwa no so sabre no ono so ne friend na kwasidua ono so toa Ofuman #1 a friend Ofuman baase no empanim sem no so na ne okan yeni. In his version of the history of the Ofumans to Nana Kwasidi Ofuman, he told the committee that his ancestors came from a who called Robo, led by Nana Jefua, who had in his possession a kind of necklace called Kanta, a spear, and a senya or a silver bowl. Near Nana Kwasidi Azukan and say, "Oh, Nana ma betchire Ofuman no if you Robo the buy Robo abodanum." Nana no di wona ni me friend Nana Jefua no ba no sika ko mpremprande ene epia ye friend senya Nana ikura no a odi wona nim e de won ba Ofuman. It was from this hole that they came to settle at Ofuman, which was uninhabited. Na be free Robo abodanum na ombe chechire Ofuman. Sabre na Ofuma asas no obia entes. At a certain stage in their history of the Ofuman ancestors, continued Nanadua. Nana Techmahine solicited the head of Ofuman in the light of the imminent war with Asantes. Ofuman did not yield to this request because he had earlier on heard about how powerful Asante was. After the Techman had been defeated in the said war in which the Ofumans did not take part, Dadeso Abahene, who led a section of the Asante army into the war, came to Ofuman while on patrol in that area. When upon his inquiry he discovered the Ofumans were independent of any chief, he invited them to visit Kumasi, which was willingly did. Nana Kwasidi also can say, Bebe chichiri Ofuman ye ohwa na Asante ene Bono manso wo no eye den ehyaase na Nana Bono hene ebesire Ofuman fo se be mmoa no nanso banfo beti anye se bebe boa no enu nti Asante ene Bono man so techuma ekon ye no odi techuma so nkunim na nkunim die no achi no na dade so aba hene Asante hene esuma no se onante pono mbo anye bia obehu se bia techumafo asojafo no ya ahobo bie se ombeko ana na oba Ofuman na obehu se Ofumanfo no beno banko ntokwa no bi no na odi wonanim de omko Asante hene enchen. In Kumasi, Ofuman hene indicated to Otumfuo his willingness to serve the latter, and that's what made to swear the oath of allegiance. From that day to the present, on the instrument of every occupant of the Ofuman stool, he swears the oath of allegiance direct to Asante hene by the Mpompozu sword. Now, I said that there's so about hene ehwehwe Ofumanfo tuo ma wo hu se Ofumanfo ankonto kwa no bi enti no odi wonanim na Ofumanfo de bepe na de wo ho kɔbɔ Asante hene na efiri saa bre no kɔ no de Asante bonoman so wo no de Ofuman ekosom Asante. According to Nanadua, it has been the duty of Ofuman hene to bring fish from the particular rivers in the area to Asante hene every year, in return for which the Asante hene also provides him with drinks, salt, and a piece of calico when celebrating his annual festival. All these gifts were routed through the Deso Abahene. Na nana kwasi do ya etwa so kan say all the bade Ofuman de ne ho kɔbɔ Asante no ayonkofa no mu no ma ne ekoba ye ne se afibia no na Asante hene hye ne fa na se otwane dwira oba asha obeje adwene nsumu nam efiri Ofuman na ono so de enkyene ene enwere fita abeche Ofumanfo na okokoso a mpanimfo no kyerese bosom bi o ha ye frɛ yensu bosom saa bosom yi na afibia no Asante hene ye etwane dwira anase oye na fasha osoma ne nkrofo ma beba na yensu bosomfo eyi apaye de ma won yensu no yensuo no bosom eyi apaye ma won se beyo na Asante man no ebegina ne nan so na beba bemfa be sampan be de nkyene ene ensa ene nwira fita ene bre yansu bosomfo. Additionally, continued Nanadua, the Ofuman people assisted the Ashantis in several wars. When Prempeh I was exiled to Seychelles, Ofuman briefly came under Techiman, but with the restoration of the Asante Confederacy in 1935, the Ofuman stood reverted to their former allegiance to the Asante hene, whom itself through the Deso Abahene. Also now, Ekoba say, Yachi Prempeh II, and no course the first didn't cause shares no dear. Emma Ofumanfo kosum Techiman. Now Prempeh II. Ebe share Asante Confederacy 2 na se no. Emma wonom sa down ne womani ekoshe ekosum Asante. Na dade so aba ehene etokoso eyebeura. Nanadua contended before the committee that Ofuman's two land belongs to Ofuman's two, and that Nanadua can say Ofuman is as de Ofumanfo dia Ofuman konwa dia enye ohene bia dia. Order for subscribe na share nama afofro nso inti nkaibo bi yento aso na Nana Kwame Jamfi, ohene of Ofuman number 2, traced his history of his tool when given evidence before the committee, According to him, the ancestors came from Amowi, together with Techman people, and first settled on Wentia Manfo, while the Techman people settled at Manso. Near Nana Kwame Jamfi a odi kan o kan se ono de Ofuman number 2 kuro no a odi so no base efiri be ne Techmanfo ne firi Amowi Bono ana abodan no Techmanfo no ekọchichire Bono manso e na wo no so ekọchichire Onwontia Manfo. While at Onwontia Manfo, the Techman invited the Ofuman number 2 grand ancestor by the name Nkamansia for a meeting and informed him that there was an impending war between the Ashantis and the Techmans, and that the latter had been advised by Bafupim to bury their guns in water if they wanted to desire more foreign power. Nana Nkamansia frowned upon the idea and returned to his base. Na osebeto Onwontia Manfo no na Nana Bono hene Techman hene Bono manso hene osuma mabefre Nkamansia na oye Ofuman number 2 da pasofo be Nana be hene no ko no de to na nim se Asante fo ayese be ne Techmanfo be ko na bafo pima ofim kransan abeka kire wo se sebe pese be tuo no powers e bom pa de tumi bom a bemfa nko hihye suum nanso so Nkamansia onyinya nanim no ka se na ba se ndi atwere tuo de hwensuo mu a ebe de na ato amfa ne ti an yasem no e no samba dampaso. In the ensuing war, the Ofumans were able to engage the Ashanti enemy for 7 days. Their pallets and gunpowder having run short, they sent bearers to Nana Techman for supplies and reinforcement, but to their surprise, the Techman had heeded Bafupim's advice by submerging all his guns in the river. Seeing that they were losing the war, some of the Ofuman number 2 subjects or ancestors fled to Fante, others to the area now known as Volta region, and a few concealed themselves in the area now called Ofuman number 2 and managed to survive the war. No say Techmanfo dampaso foi and Ofuman number 2 foi beni Asante the bosso na watwe baako na ntokwa etuam na batuduro san be so nipa so nko na Techman no nko gibimro ho no ko hum se Bafupim na da na obeda da Techman tie de ni tu ko se nsum enti banyamwa bia amfiri Techman ma nam so ma Asantefo no edi besunkunim ma Ofuman number 2 dampasofo adehye no binom edwane kobo be ho adwa e wo Volta region ebinom so dwane kobo be ho adwa e wo Fante e bo bia na efre ho Fante land. After the hostilities had ceased, with Asante victorious, the ancestors then returned to find that the entire settlements at Onwontia Manfo had been burned down to ashes, and so they came back to their hiding place, now called number 2. While there, said Nana Jamfi, his ancestors met some people who said they were from Techman. They were looking for Nana Gamra, the queen mother of Techman. They lived together with these people, hence the Ofumans, Abase, and that is Ofuman number 1 and Ofuman Dampaso. Nyoka ayane se ndokwana ski besane eba benchi ayefra ho Onwontia Manfo no na Asantifo akoshi kru no nti emabede beti domu ebe bo be ho adwa e wo babia na efra ho Ofuman ho na bebihia adehie bia na beso ebe namo a Nana Dwamra oye Tetman hema nana jamfi ne oto asoka ye ne se besamba babi a nnebe frawo Ofuman no nkrofo binum so firi babi eba ho na be hwehwe Nana Dwamra oye Tetman hema saafo no ebebo obehu adwa ewo ho enti ema Ofuman kuro no ekoye mienu ye Ofuman saafo no ebefre wo mo abase ena beso be frebe dampasofo. Subsequently, continued Nana Jamfi, the Asante Hene Nana Bonsu waged war against the Germans. Adum Hene, who was among the Asante contingent, sought the assistance of Ofumans in this war, and the latter agreed. After the defeat of the Germans, Adum Hene invited Ofumans to Kumasi to celebrate the victory. On their arrival, they stayed in the house of Adum Hene, who took them to Asante Hene. After this visit, at any time Ofuman Hene was installed, he swore oath of allegiance to the Asante Hene, and this was done through Adum Hene. However, when Tetman Hene returned from German during Prempeh's exile to Seychelles, Ofuman number 2 went to serve Tetman. Near all can say, no chino ena Asante ne German ekokontokwa. Nankunimdie baaye no na Asante Hene ofre Ofuman dampasufui. Sebemre Kumasi na bemejiboni. Bebaaye no beko Kumasi na Asante no pokwa the first de be share Adum Hene nsa. No catch them say dampasufui emmo amode bo amenti fi nekro. Mufi wura mo mesome. Mufi wura ne Adum Hene. Me de mo ahye ne nsa. Eno enamso ema bekosum Asante Hene. The first. Ye chi no ekwo Seychelles no. Ema Ofuman dampaso ekosum Tetman Hene. Orofo subscribe na share. A High African History and Heritage TV. Erikase Bono asi. Na afei ena ebe babam. Minu ya wutie me. Wo hu se nkenkan sema mutie yi. Ifri amanamanya ewo Bono ne Bono East regions mu. Apart from Tetman, na ye Bono Manso Kingdom, ene German Kingdom. Adishi akanu nyina. Asante anko anchebe. Oni binum konye nso wantimi won. Oni wanchifo konye wantimi won. Oni banafo konye wantimi won. Banafo ni twa kusi bodum neti. Ote ase entino sa mankese mienu ya eye Bono Manso eni German ena Asante koche on na German so no Asante anchebe se bebetena na himfie bense nifa a bebe ye Asante Hene na trankunwa no bi no betoko soa di bahiniye no na ne na Asante hia firi be ho ne sa afi bi obeka se homram ska ko na memfa nkoto atu nkoko we enam so ma German 40 atuam prenan the last atuate no and the friend Edinkra wo 1818 se Asante Hene tax our tax ben anu ehyedodo ewom se Edinkra wo German adoma rekum nomene efiri boma area ha ko sampa eni wanchi ne boshe ene babia ne doma traditional area wo nyina na German tafo no ene no ede boni a enya sempotoa ewom se Edinkra wo no nkunimdi amma German fo no side mum de nanso so no after the Second War 1874 Britain for so ekuti Kumase na be she Kumase ma Asante tumi no eto nsuo mu German for no gye be fa ahodie saa so na tetuan for so gye be fa ahodie na nipa Asante hene wo ne be di si ani ekonto kwakora no be no broni kuti a no be gye be fa ahodie a nne no bre be yo akọ bio na kampese amanamanya aka a wankwanche be nanso be no mwa na bebe boa wo etintim wahenie no ene na obeka se saafo no ye wonkwa hayem de debida Asante hene ekasa nye ne kwasem ene no orofo subscribe na share matifo entie kase boebi enti no Bono adehia wo Bono ne Bono East Regions modie nka benya adehia esesa Asantefo hu sibe fom kasa Asantefo mo ka Bono ni aboa Bono fo ye nkwasiafo no mo na mo katia mo ho mo ni mo bakosem nipa a waboa no ono wo ye kwasia o nipa bibini de sa na tie so boa no a odo ye kwasia wagimi gise nipa na ye de mako be so nani na yese kwasia nani ti agromo na agro na ye den agro na gu mre na kwa ni mu no Bono fo ye ni bete na nne de ye ni kura tete sa enetie inti Bono fo nye Asantefo nkoa bio abakose ni ameda mekai ani ada ho na oko Ofuman se wa hu Ofuman abakosem no ija eda ho ayekuro no mu akemienu Ofuman dampaso eni Ofuman abas no ne farba efiri Asante hene no a efise kuro no da ho okwa eni kuro no fa abe ya basefo bedo bebe ho bebo bata no ka kire be se mombe so metru da de so aba hene dampaso fo so baaye na ma bebe so tru adum hene na chese opoku the first wa check kuro no mienu neatly enentum ahemienu wo ho no enti no eja edata no so binimu no ne farba eye Asante political strategy kwani Asante hyehyɛ na hini ewo ho ena di ja to ho no nansa na ja no be ebe ja no gise bonfo amwo ho no motemo ho asese ene de donko owumabre ensuo ta ponkyerene a oje ho ye na ye befa wa adamfo ene ya aba ye mehye wase bio ye betena se adi ho so ye di ekui namom emoa bi wo ho na ohia wo hye wafa no pese ye beboa de a ye betima beboa se ye no afa adamfo nti o ware ba no ja no na sa oba na waja na busuani wu a osi wu a emfa ho se waja no esese okwayi sa de nde ye beye edi Asante sa de na ankoba so a titente na tuo na etotota no so bi ho no esha ase chero 100 years now etunkai onte se adehia bebe ho be kase no ya ye bedi ho so ye nkohye ohene bi ase onte se adehia be wo sata no so bi nkuri a mebobo yi BBC gira ye no enya de asomdwie ebeba ponu hoda enti nkankase ma ye kenkan yi hwan na ye obi master eda di introduce bonfo ya Asante for be masters because Benedict trade baboamo ma Asante man atintim enti bonfo yi be mo afri njen na hafofo abeye denchirafo ifri chinako e de hafo beso abakosem ne be kaaye ebeden ebeba betudwa de no ne be ma atifo mati debate na asiyi merenkenkansem no ebisia a high African History and Heritage TV yeda wase yemamo emoniti adehye